Hello and welcome to this video on symbolism. Symbols are something that you probably use in your everyday life, but they're also an important part of literature as well. So what is it? Symbolism is a stylistic technique that involves the use of symbols to express ideas, emotions, and states of mind. A symbol is something that stands for something else. It is the use of a concrete object that is used to represent an abstract idea. The meaning of a symbol is a representation of something deeper than the superficial meaning of the image. You use symbols to represent things, convey emotions, or ideas. So here are some symbols that you're probably familiar with from day-to-day life or that you've seen around. One more note about symbolism before we dig a little bit deeper and look at an example in literature. Context matters when it comes to symbolism. For example, say you have a symbol that's a chain. So what kind of images does that create in your mind already? It could symbolize unity, connection, and strength, or bondage, oppression, and limitation. So it can be dependent on the style of the chain. If it's weak, if there's a broken link, is it being held together? Is it being used to bind or hold? So depending on the context of this particular symbol, it could change the meaning. Another example, a flower. What could a flower symbolize? So again, a flower, if it's a bright, happy, vibrant flower, maybe full, in a pasture in springtime or something like that. It could represent life, growth, rebirth, and happiness. But if you have a droopy, wilting flower, it could represent death, sorrow, grief, or sadness. So again, depending on the context of the flower, what the flower looks like, what's going on, and some other elements within the story, even the setting, it can drastically change the symbolic meaning. Let's take a look at a few examples of some symbols in The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And of course, there are more symbols than what we're going to go over here, but at this point, we are not finished with our reading. So we're just going to look at a few that have popped up. This is analysis 1 of 6. So we're going to look at 6 symbols that we've encountered so far in our reading. What do the sheep symbolize in The Alchemist? The sheep symbolize people who do not pursue their personal legends because they are blind to them. They represent the ordinary, everyday life. Examples in the novel, the baker and the crystal merchant. The only things that concerned the sheep were food and water. Yes, their days were all the same, with the seemingly endless hours between sunrise and dusk. And they had never read a book in their young lives and didn't understand when the boy told them about the sights of the cities. They were content with just food and water. What do Urim and Thummim symbolize in The Alchemist? The stones symbolize the various omens that are driving forces throughout the novel. Santiago learns to understand his environment and listen to his instincts, which leads to a spiritual growth and an understanding of the soul and language of the world. By not using the stones, Santiago takes control of his own destiny. He didn't consider mending the hole. The stones could fall through any time they wanted. He had learned that there were certain things one shouldn't ask about, so as not to flee from one's own destiny. I promised that I would make my own decisions, he said to himself. What does the crystal symbolize in The Alchemist? The crystal represents fragility and clarity. After his journey begins with despair and loss, Santiago is tempted to give up on his quest for treasure. The crystal symbolizes the fragility of dreams. However, Santiago inevitably resolves to continue in his pursuit of his personal legend. He suddenly felt tremendously happy. He could always go back to being a shepherd. He could always become a crystal salesman again. Maybe the world had other hidden treasures, but he had a dream, and he had met with a king. That doesn't happen to just anyone. What does the desert symbolize in The Alchemist? The desert is symbolic of all the obstacles and hardships that stand between people and their dreams. In the novel, characters learn to accept the desert, even listen to it. The desert is full of hardship, silence, emptiness, monotony, and tribal wars, which represent the serious difficulties that stand in the way of the realization of one's dreams. It symbolizes the tests that one must overcome for spiritual growth. You don't have to understand the desert. All you have to do is contemplate a simple grain of sand, and you will see in it all the marvels of creation. What does the oasis symbolize in The Alchemist? The oasis symbolizes love, life, and domesticity. The oasis serves as a contrast to the scarcity and desolation of the desert. It was difficult not to think about what he had left behind, the desert, with its endless monotony, but put him to dreaming. The boy could still see the palm trees, the wells, and the face of the woman he loved. He could see the Englishman at his experiments and the camel driver, who was a teacher, without realizing it. What do the hawks symbolize in The Alchemist? The symbolism of the hawks is actually pointed out in the novel. For the characters, they are symbolic of life in the empty desert. They are also symbolic of violence and aggression. Santiago sees the flight of the hawks as a warning. However, the alchemist hawk represents the taming of aggression. One could open a book to any page or look at a person's hand. One could turn a card or watch the flight of the birds. Whatever the thing observed, one could find a connection with its experience of the moment. Actually, it wasn't that those things in themselves revealed anything at all. It was just that people, looking at what was occurring around them, could find some means of penetration to the soul of the world. If you have any questions about symbolism or the symbols so far, make sure to talk to your teacher. We'll explore more later. Thanks for watching.